Hello everyone, and welcome to the Kappa Webinar Producer Training Session. My name is Karen Holmes, and I'm the Education Assistant at Kappa Kappa Gamma Headquarters, and I will be your technical producer and moderator this evening. This webinar is being presented by Marla Williams, Director of Education and Training, and will feature Reese Jolch, producer team member, as a guest speaker. Our goal for this webinar is to demonstrate the technical side of running a webinar, explain the producer's role in a webinar, to show how you can support the presenter and panelists in delivering the presentations, and to share some troubleshooting and best practice suggestions. Thank you to all of you for volunteering to support Kappa's webinar program by sharing your time and technical skills. And before we start the presentation, let's take a moment to be sure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. Marla, can we see the next one? On the right side of your screens, you will see the attendee control panel, and on the left is the webinar viewer window. The viewer window displays the presenter's screen when the webinar begins. So right now what you're seeing is your control panel. There are a few features that attendees will need to know. First, you can minimize the control panel or expand it by clicking on the horizontal double arrow button in the upper left corner. Minimizing the panel allows you a better view of the presentation, and you can take a moment to practice that now. In the audio window, you can select your audio connection. When you first log into the webinar, the default mode is VoIP or Voice over IP, which uses your computer's microphone and speakers. You may use VoIP, or you may select telephone and dial the conference call number and access code to enter the conference call. You must also dial the audio pin, which will be shown in your control panel. Take a moment to locate the Raise Your Hand button along the left side of your control panel. It allows you to virtually raise your hand if you have a question, or if you want to respond to a question being asked by the presenter. Click this button to raise your hand now. Good, I see you finding it. And if you click it again, it will lower your hand. Great job, everyone. Another important feature of the control panel is the questions pane, and this is how you will communicate. To submit a question, you can type it into the questions box. These may be questions related to the presentation, or if you're having some technical troubles related to GoToWebinar system, you can type that there as well. You might be asked by the presenter to type your ideas or responses as part of an exercise during the webinar. And right now, if you would just type the answer to this question, where are you from? And we have Texas, Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Williamsport, Seattle, LA. Great. A couple from Los Angeles. Thank you. During the webinar, you might be asked to respond to a polling question or a survey. Please take time to participate, as your input and ideas are valuable to all of us in the group. If you need to step away for a moment, don't close the GoToWebinar window, as you'll be required to log in again. If you do experience problems with audio, one option is to switch to the conference call feature and listen over your telephone rather than using your computer's microphone and speakers. This webinar is being recorded, and the online archive should be available in about a week on the Kappa website. Are there any questions so far? Seeing no questions, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Marla Williams.
All right. Good evening, everyone. As Karen said, my name is Marla Williams, and I am the Director of Education and Training at Kappa Headquarters. And just really excited to work with all of you and to have you participate in this webinar tonight and being a part of this webinar producer team. We're going to start with a brief warm-up question. If you didn't have to worry about lack of time, what personal side project would you start? Go ahead and answer that question in the question bar.
We did have a question come in just at the end. The question was, Allison asks, are the participants able to see other people's answers? And the answer to that is no, only the producer. So only when you are producing a webinar, you are the only person who gets to see the questions or the answers submitted that way. And some of these fun and exciting things you might try. Starting a nonprofit, cooking classes, finish some knitting, scanning family photos and cataloging them, creating photo books. That's what I would do.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That sounds like within the group lots of different diverse interests, but a common thread together in supporting CAPA's educational programs. So, with that in mind, we're going to take a look. Our goal for this session tonight will be to demonstrate the technical side of running a webinar, outline the expectations of a producer, explain how you can support the presenter and panelists, and suggest ways to build interactivity into the webinar, and share some troubleshooting guidelines for the technical glitches that will demand your attention. So what is GoToWebinar? We are using GoToWebinar platform for delivering webinars. GoToWebinar is provided through a grant through the Kappa Kappa Gamma Foundation. Our department has been working with GoToWebinar for the past 4 years. We maintain an annual subscription and there is no cost to the user. With our current license, we can actually have up to 1,000 attendees join the webinar the session. This would be very impressive, of course, if we could get that many in our audience. To date, our largest webinars have been right around 100 attendees. GoToWebinar is an effective way to provide training to large groups and can be very useful for small groups as well because there's no cost for a session. GoToWebinar has been successfully used in place of a conference call. A webinar offers the additional benefit of sharing visual information, files, documents, etc., PowerPoint, Word, Excel, website, images. The content of a webinar usually begins with a PowerPoint presentation or slideshow, but doesn't need to stop there. Virtually anything can be shown on your computer screen can be shared on a webinar, but the one limitation we do still have is utilizing video with GoToWebinar. At this time, video cannot be shared on the webinar. Improvement to the technology is on the way. Video conferencing and an app for smartphones are 2 features in development and expected soon. One option, of course, is you can excuse your participants to go someplace to actually watch a video and then rejoin back in with the webinar at a set time. So that is one possibility with video at this point. GoToWebinar is designed to be simple to use. Attendees may enter the webinar by clicking the entry in the confirmation email. Of course, there are always those technical difficulties to complicate our work, and this is one of the reasons we are organizing a team of producers. So let's take a look at roles and responsibilities. First, we have the producer. The producer starts the webinar and manages the in-session controls. She is the master of ceremonies for the session. Tasks include starting the webinar, launching polls, forwarding questions to panelists, monitoring attendees, providing technical support, recording the session, and suggesting ways to make the session more interactive. Does it sound a bit intimidating? Don't worry, if we can learn this, you can too. The next role is a panelist. Panelists are the guest speakers who present information and answer questions. They join via a special invitation from GoToWebinar. A panelist can be made presenter and show her screen at any time during the event. And panelists may communicate with the producer, presenter, and other panelists through a chat pane. The next role is attendee, which all of you are tonight. Attendees are the audience members in the webinar. They do not have speaking privileges until given permission by the producer. Attendees may communicate through the hand-raising tool and the question pane. And finally, we have a presenter. The presenter is the person sharing your screen. This is a flexible role and may be a producer or a panelist, and this role might change several times during the webinar session.
Marla, one more thing before we go on. GoToWebinar labels the producer as organizer, so we needed to make a note of that, and it's not listed that way in the presentation. In GoToWebinar's documents, you will see organizer instead of producer, but they are one and the same.
Good point. All right. We're going to talk about starting a webinar. So let's take a look at the steps that a producer takes to starting a webinar. These are the same steps for starting a practice session. The very first is sign in to the webinar. You sign in to www.gotowebinar.com using the email address webinar@kkg.org. Our password is pinklady1870 and is case sensitive. All this is information that Karen sends you. You choose your webinar from a list of scheduled sessions. You click Start to launch the webinar session. If you are conducting a practice session, you will click Practice. And just so you know why we selected Pink Lady, if you have not been to Kappa headquarters, we do have a Pink Lady ghost who is rumored to take residence at headquarters. So most of us joke that most of our work passwords have something to do with Pink Lady. All right, then you're going to choose your audio. For our webinars, we have two audio conferencing options. The first, as Karen mentioned earlier, is VoIP, Voice over IP, which utilizes the computer microphone and speakers. That's what I'm using tonight. I'm speaking to you using my computer speakers. The second is a conference call number and access code provided by GoToWebinar. This means using either a landline telephone or mobile phone. During a webinar session, you may switch between audio formats. In the audio pane, you click telephone or mic and speakers to change your settings without exiting the webinar. This can be helpful when there are issues with the audio connection. During your practice session, you can test the audio by recording a segment of the broadcast. There are advantages to both VoIP and telephone for audio. Using VoIP can be more convenient than holding a telephone for the duration of the webinar. You can juggle things like your water glass and your notes, etc. At the same time, maintaining a separate conference call connection to your attendees can be beneficial. In the event of a glitch with the webinar on-screen broadcast, the conference call allows you to reach the audience. Best advice, be prepared to switch audio as needed. The webinar begins as a sub-conference for producers and panelists only. This allows you to talk privately and run through any logistical concerns and discuss last-minute details before the audio is enabled to the attendees. You will hear silence until the webinar is launched. During the sub-conference before the broadcast is started, on-hold beeps play when an attendee connects to a webinar. This alerts you that attendees are on the line. If you prefer not to hear this alert, the producer can disable the on-hold beeps by clicking Edit in the audio pane. All right, now we're going to take a look at telephone. If using your telephone for audio, dial the phone number and access code that appears in the audio pane on your control panel. You will also need to dial the audio pin to enable audio controls. Keep in mind that this is not a toll-free call. Long-distance charges will apply. Using your speakerphone can be a good option. Just be sure to test the sound quality during your practice session and be especially cautious of background noise. To start the broadcast in a conference call, dial *1 on your telephone. VoIP. If using VoIP, adjust the volume of your computer's microphone and speakers. You may test the audio by clicking Audio Setup in the audio pane. You will see the green sound indicator light go up. GoToWebinar Best Practices calls for the use of a headset. While this is the recommendation, the majority of Kappa webinars have been recorded via telephone or microphone with decent sound quality. If you have a headset, feel free to use it. If you don't have one, you are not required to purchase one to be part of this team. It works perfectly fine without using a headset.
Hey Marla, I want to jump in really quick and mention that GoToWebinar defaults to VoIP. So if you or one of your panelists experience some extreme echoing during a session, you may want to alert your panelist or even yourself to make sure that the telephone feature is checked, and only the telephone feature is checked if you are using the telephone. Because again, if it's the mic and speaker checked and you're on the telephone, you'll get this crazy echo. So,
yes, and Reese, that's such a good point. I did a webinar a few months back, and even after having done a zillion of these webinars, I did exactly that, and I was so flustered. I could not figure out why it was happening, and finally did. But great point. All right, setting up to record. From the control panel, you will click the View menu and select Recording. The recording pane will appear in the control panel. Click Settings. The My Documents folder of the facilitator is default location for saving a recording. You may designate the location on your local hard drive where recording file will be saved. Also under Settings, Video, choose Convert to Windows Media Format. After the webinar, you will need to transfer the file to Kappa headquarters via the FTP. You will go to http://uploads.kkg.org and follow the instructions for the file transfer. If you are using a Mac, please arrange for another presenter or panelist to be responsible for the recording, because using a Mac you are unable to do that. All right, here's a poll. Where does your webinar recording get stored? On the Kappa server, on the producer's C drive, wherever the producer chooses to save it, or I don't know. So our poll is open, and we would like to ask you to respond to the questions.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll close. And the results, we have 33% saying on the Kappa server, 25% on the producer's C drive, and 42% wherever the producer chooses to save it. The correct answer is wherever the producer chooses to save it. This was a tricky question because technically the producer's C drive could also be accurate, and eventually it does go to the Kappa server. So just to get you thinking a little bit, you do get to choose where that recording is saved until it's uploaded to the server.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All right, now we're going to talk about how to change the presenter. Remember that you, the producer, are the presenter at the start of the webinar, so that is all of you. The first step will be to give presenter controls to the appropriate panelist or designated presenter of the webinar. In the screen sharing pane on the control panel, you click Change Presenter and select the appropriate presenter. The presenter will receive an alert on her computer. She should have the opening slide of her PowerPoint presentation up and running. Presenter must click Show My Screen, and it may take a moment or two for the broadcast to begin and her screen to be displayed. And just to kind of let you know, before we started this webinar tonight, Karen had control of the screen when Reese and I joined Karen with the webinar before the broadcast even started. We switched, Karen switched the mode to me and changed it so that I was the presenter even before we began the broadcast. So we just have found that that makes it a little bit more seamless. But of course, if you have different presenters, you'll have to change a couple of times during the session. All right, steps to start. These steps are included in the general script that you will receive. You might want to write these down for yourself on a sticky note to post near your computer as an extra reminder. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first is start screen sharing. By changing presenters and giving over the presenter controls, the presenter will need to click Share My Screen. Start broadcast. To launch the webinar for attendees, you'll dial *1 on the conference call or click Start Broadcast on the Organizer Control Panel. When the broadcast is started, the audio connection is live and the attendees can now hear the presentation. You wait for VoiceOver to announce, "The broadcast is now starting. All attendees can hear you now." Then we start recording. If the Start Record option is not visible, it can be found under the View menu. Click Settings to edit the location where the recorded file will be saved. Then, movement triggers recording. The slide transition or mouse movement to activate the recording. The GoToWebinar expert suggests making a duplicate of the title slide. The presenter can advance to the duplicate copy of the opening slide. This is not noticeable to the attendees and will just simply trigger the recording. There was a lot covered in that. Do you have any questions about that section? The steps for starting the webinar. If you do, just type them in your question panel.
Looks like we're all set to move on right now.
Anything, Karen?
Yep, we're all set to move on.
All right, great. Supporting the presenter. So now that the webinar is up and running, the presenter will take the stage while the producer is at work behind the scenes. If this presenter can advance her slide. There we go. All right. Panelist invitation. The presenter and panelists join the webinar by clicking the link included in the invitation sent via email from GoToWebinar. The link is unique to the individual and should not be shared or forwarded. The control panel, presenter and panelists. Here you can see the panelist control panel has some of the same features as the producer control panel. You will find arrows to expand and minimize the panel to allow a larger viewing area, the mute/unmute button, and the option to test audio functions. Also notice that the chat pane, which is a fast and convenient way, allows for panelists and presenters to communicate with webinar staff and attendees. Panelists do not see a list of the attendees. Control panel. When a panelist is made a presenter, the screen sharing and audience view panes appear. The audience view shows what the audience is currently seeing. The bar at the top of the pane shows the percentage of the audience that is viewing the current screen refresh. A red bar indicates that much of the audience is not yet viewing the current image on their screen, and you may wish to wait a moment for the transfer to be complete. The screen sharing pane allows the panelist to pause screen sharing and to transfer presenter controls to another panelist. When the presenter pauses screen sharing, the attendees see the waiting room screen. This pause feature can be useful when the presenter needs to locate a file on her computer, access a website, or make other adjustments before returning to the screen broadcast. All right, question and answer. While the presenter is leading the session, the producer takes on the question and answer responsibilities. And during a really lively webinar, this can be a lot of work. So, managing questions. Be prepared that this can be a full-time job just onto its own. You will be receiving questions related to the content as well as technical issues. Presenters and panelists do not see questions coming in from attendees. Questions can be forwarded to a specific panelist or to all panelists. The response can be sent directly to the person who asked or to the entire group. Okay, before the webinar, discuss plans for handling questions with the presenter and panelists. If responding to questions aloud, read it and include the name of the person who asked the question. If additional information is needed, you may ask the attendees to explain by typing in the question box. You may also give that attendee speaking privileges by right-clicking on her name in the attendee pane. This can create an additional level of interactivity. And Reese is going to talk with us a little bit about advantages of expanding and rearranging the question panes and chat windows.
Well, as Marla discussed, you have a control panel on the right side of your screen, and if it stays in that control panel the way it comes, you can only maximize one pane at a time. This can be a little difficult because if you are behind the scenes managing all of the questions as well as monitoring the chatting that happens between panelists and organizers, because panelists and organizers can ask questions amongst themselves in a chat feature. So if you're looking at that and you're looking at the questions and you're also trying to monitor audio as well as whose hands raised, only being able to maximize one screen at a time can be, I'll say, frustrating. So one thing I discovered during the last webinar I produced was that you can actually grab onto each of the individual pages and paste them all over your computer, whatever looks good for you. So I actually keep open separately and grabbed separately a chat feature open and a questions box open. That way I can keep a monitor on all of those. So again, sometimes some producers like it clean and pretty and they're able to keep a monitor closely on the short feature grab tab, but for me, I'm really visual and I like to have all of my screens up. So again, there's definitely a lot of opportunity to really put your desktop the way you want it to. So you do have the ability to expand or minimize the window by clicking on the plus or minus sign in the upper left-hand corner. You can also flag important questions if you wish to return to them later. And then additionally, to respond to a question, you can also highlight that question and type your response and then decide if you will send it privately or to the group. So there are a lot of wonderful ways that you can make this work for you in your webinar.
Great. Thanks, Reese. All right, taking a look at ending the webinar. When concluding the webinar, be sure to thank the speakers, share contact information, and remind the attendees to complete the follow-up survey that will be displayed upon exiting the webinar. You want to click Stop Recording on the control panel. At this time, the presenter can stop sharing her screen. Remember that the audio connection is still active, and conversation between the producer and presenters can still be heard by attendees. That's really important to remember. Make sure that all attendees have left if you are continuing on any conversations, or make sure to go ahead and just end the webinar and carry the conversation on in a private setting. The webinar is active until you close your webinar screen and end the session. Plan to connect with the presenter with a phone call after you're closed. Then you want to upload the recorded file to http://uploads.kappa-kappa-gamma.org and follow the instructions. Check Send Links to Files via email, and that's where you will want to include Karen Holmes, kholmes@kkg.org, in the email address to send link box. All right, we're going to take a look at troubleshooting. Now that we have completed the webinar perfectly with no technical issues, here are some tips for troubleshooting when something does go wrong. All right, troubleshooting. First, if you're using the telephone for your audio connection and have a sound quality issue, hang up and dial back in to help clear up a bad connection. A participant using the VoIP option may experience feedback or cause an echo effect for other participants. If this occurs, ask all participants to turn off their computer microphone and speakers and to dial in using a phone line or cell phone instead. Mute each panelist and or attendees one at a time to determine the cause of an echo or static. Are you kind of catching a pattern here? A lot of some of the technical issues have to do with audio. Entering the audio pin enables full audio controls for the producer, panelist, or attendee. Ideally, the audio, microphone, or telephone icon next to each attendee in the attendee pane will be green, indicating a good connection. If the pin has not been entered, the icon will be gray. To send the audio pin to an attendee, right-click the attendee's name in the attendee list from the organizer control panel and select Send Audio Pin. Ask attendees to exit completely and re-enter the webinar from the link they received via email. If a panelist or presenter is listed as an attendee, right-click on her name to promote a panelist. You may invite by sending the link directly to an email address. Click Invite Others in the attendee list pane. Producers can send a broadcast message to all attendees using the chat feature. The message will appear in the attendee's question pane. Most important is to keep calm and carry on. Rescheduling a webinar is always an option and is not the end of the world. And as you go along and have produced more of these webinars, you will begin to build your own list of troubleshooting tips, which is one of the things Reese has done. And Reese, can you share a little bit about your troubleshooting experience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I was lucky enough to be a producer for the past LC training webinar. And unfortunately, once the presenter's screen was shared, a few of the attendees were unable to see. That is, their screen was just entirely black. And so I thumbed quickly through my manual and trying to remember what I'd seen on some of the training. And I had each of them minimize their screens. And then when they maximize them again, most were able to see the webinar. So that is one trick of the trade, is ask all of the people who can't see anything if there is a visual issue, just have them minimize their screen. But unfortunately, there was one woman who was unable to see, and again, thumbing quickly through the guide that GoToWebinar provides. I unfortunately had no luck, so I just, again, had her log out, and then once she logged back in, she was able to see the webinar. Again, this only took less than a minute, but it feels like forever while it's happening. So as Marla stated, just keep calm, and if you are having to carry on, just carry on, or if it's a smaller group and you can throw in some polling questions or some other things to do that keeps interactivity going, go for that. In fact, we did not have polling questions in our back pocket for this past webinar. So one thing I definitely recommend is having, 3 or 4, because you have the opportunity to have 8 polling questions. So maybe 3 or 4 that are germane to your webinar, and then maybe 3 or 4 just fun, keeping interactivity going if there is some troubleshooting issues that you have to go. So just that just-in-case plan ready. So that is it. And then also, while I was lucky enough not to need it for the webinar that I produced, I absolutely recommend that you keep handy the GoToWebinar tech support phone number. And if I could ask Karen to kindly send this out. I'm chatting that to you, Karen, and I don't know if you're able to cut and paste that out. But the global support number is 800-263-6317, and of course that's easily found on the GoToWebinar customer support website. So, but have that handy. Everything falls apart. They're actually really great and are helpful. So that is my recommendation.
One more quick troubleshooting tip. Angie Carter tonight had some trouble getting in. What she ended up doing was to uninstall the GoToWebinar software that was already on her computer from presenting in the past, and then she was able to get in by using a different email address when she registered. So sometimes it just takes a great amount of creativity but we do whatever we can to get things working again.
Great. All right. Just because I think it'd be fun to use the hand raising feature again, can you raise your hand if you are a Mac user, please? Okay, great. We have a few Mac users tonight, so this will be very useful information. As a Mac presenter, your expanded control panel will be visible to attendees as a black silhouette, and sometimes part of the control panel are fully visible, not blacked out to attendees. This can obstruct a portion of what you are presenting. Presenters using a Mac should leave the control panel collapsed as much as possible during the webinar. Mac users do not have the option to select and test microphone and speaker devices for use with VoIP option in their preferences menu, but can select and test their audio devices in session through the control panel audio pane. Mac users can select audio devices in session only. GoToWebinar will automatically detect the input and output devices connected to your computer. Mac users are not able to record a webinar. Recording a webinar is only available using a PC. If you want your webinar recorded, invite a PC-based panelist or attendee and promote to organizer in session. GoToWebinar plans. Mac users do not have the Practice Webinar button on the My Webinars page. Mac presenters do not have drawing tools. I'm starting to feel annoyed if I was a Mac user. Although Karen tells me there are strides being made with Mac for GoToWebinar soon. Mac users do not have a dashboard pane. The dashboard pane functions like a shortcut to show the timer, attendance, attendee, attentiveness, hand raised, and number of unanswered questions. Audience view is not available to Mac users. If Java integration with Safari or Firefox stops working, you may need to reinstall or update your Java plugin. Click the icon in the top left corner of your screen and click Software Update in the menu. Once the search for available updates is finished, click Show Details to review the list for any Java updates. If none are found, you already have the most recent update and simply need to reinstall Java. Bottom line though, you obviously can be a Mac user and do a webinar. There's just a couple of little finesses that need to be done in order to make it work smoothly. But it is definitely doable, and we've had other people produce and present using a Mac. All right, make it interactive. You have experienced several ways to personalize a webinar for attendees. What are some of the strategies for interactivity that we have seen in this session? Can you type into your question pane some responses? What are some things we've done already with this webinar to make this session more interactive? Are there any responses, Karen?
I think we're having a technical difficulty with the questions pane. I see that many of you are asking them, but they're not showing for me. So give me a moment and see if I can sort this out. Oh, here they are. Okay, different presenters, hands raised, polling, asking a question, asking personal questions, global chats. Good, you all were paying good attention. Thank you. Pretty green screen with shapes. Thanks, Allison.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about, as you've noticed, we've done some different things to make things interactive. But here are just some other additional things to think about. And as the producer, this isn't necessarily your responsibility But we hope that as a producer, when you are working with the presenters, that you will work with them and help make suggestions for building more interactivity into the webinar. Because it is something that studies definitely show, the more interactivity we can build into webinars, the more participants are going to learn. So things to think about. Include other software applications. Don't be afraid to move away from the PowerPoint and visit kappa.org, look up a website, show an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document, share photos or images to vary the visual content. I'm just going to show you an example right here. We could easily just take you on a little tour here. Oh, joke on 2.5 Men poster. All right, but we could go and visit the Kappa website. And let's see, how many of you have been to the Kappa Learning Institute? We could go into the website, we could go and take a tour of the Kappa Learning Institute by coming over here and clicking on the e-learning portal. Just simply leaving your PowerPoint screen can just be simply a change up in the pace and the building in that interactivity. All right, and it was really as simple as that. Minimizing my PowerPoint, going to a website. I could have pulled up a document. I could have shared with you photos from my family vacation last week. Those sort of things can build an interactivity. You may create up to 8 polling questions to be utilized during your webinar. These can be created prior to your webinar, during your practice session, and we really do encourage you to do them prior to the webinar. They can be done on the fly if you needed to, but it definitely is much more efficient to do it prior to. Direct your attendees to submit their questions in the questions pane on the attendees control panel. Another way to utilize the questions pane is to ask a verbal question and instruct your audience to type and submit their responses in the question panes like we did tonight. This is a great way to check comprehension and to get feedback, because it can be a little odd for those of you that are used to facilitating in front of groups of people to talk to a computer screen and get no nods, no eye contact, not even an occasional person looking at you and sort of expressing that they understand. So we have to build in ways in order to get that. The hand raise feature in the control panel enables the attendees to virtually raise a hand to ask a question, participate in a collective survey. How many of you use Mac computers? And we got hands raised. Respond to a question or comment, request permission to speak on the webinar with audio enabled, etc. The presenter can quickly survey the audience and check understanding with simply a yes or no question and respond with the hand raising feature. How many of you just understood what I said? Please raise your hand. Build in time for short breaks during your presentation and encourage attendees to submit questions during this time. Use the drawing tools, a pen, a highlighter, an arrow, a stamp, a spotlight to draw attention to particular areas of your screen. We had so much fun in our practice session yesterday. I've never used this before, and I was having a lot of fun playing, and we'll just highlight this. You can use a spotlight. This is a very important word right there. You can, I liked this feature.
I was hoping you were going to do your drawing again. It's so lovely.
So you can have some fun with some interactivity. You can see this would have different applications. Yes. What did we call this yesterday, Reese? My smiling tomato. So, the important thing, though, to remember when you use the drawing tools, you'll want to always click normal non-drawing mode. So now we're back into normal non-drawing mode. You can change presenters to vary the speaking voice and style of delivery. Right-click on a panelist in the attendee list to give presenter controls. You can unmute attendees and hold a lively discussion. You can click Give Mouse and Keyboard to allow another participant to take over control of the mouse and keyboard on your presentation screen. If you have a fairly small group, maybe 10 or less people, there might even be an opportunity to give an assignment to people prior to a webinar and have them come prepared to present and they could share their screen to show what they developed for the topic. You can remind the audience that attentiveness is tracked for webinar attendees. Interacting, responding to questions, answering polls, submitting questions and responses to the question pane improves an attendee's attentiveness rating. All right. Polls. Up to 8 polling questions can be created during the webinar session. You may choose a single answer poll, which allows attendees to select only one response, or multiple answer in which attendees can choose several responses from a list. Regardless of who is presenting, the presenter controls the polling feature during this, the producer controls the polling feature during the session. Panelists and presenters do not vote in the poll. To launch a poll, you follow these simple steps. Open the poll. In the control panel, click Open Poll. Read the polling question and the options. Announce that you will allow a moment for all of the attendees to respond. When the majority have submitted a response, announce a countdown saying, the poll will close in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Click Close Poll. Click Share Results. Read the results aloud. Click Hide Results to return to the presentation. If you do not hide the results, the attendees continue to see the poll instead of the presentation. This is one of those lessons we've learned the hard way for several minutes into a webinar. For help with polls, you can watch and engage your audience video on gotowebinar.com. Reese, do you have anything to add regarding polls?
Basically, like I said before, definitely say 1 or 2 of those polling questions just for fun, random questions in case you do hit a technical difficulty wall and you need time to resolve an issue. That way you can run those polls while you clean up behind the scenes.
Great. Thank you. All right. Now it's time for you to practice. Here is the challenge. We're going to give you an assignment right now. We would like you to choose something on your computer that you would like to share with the group. It could be a website that you visit every day. It could be a recent photo. It could be a blank Word document in which you type a 6-word story about your day or something else of your choice. After 1 minute, we will be asking for volunteers who are willing to be promoted to panelists and take the presenter controls and share their screen. So take a minute, think about what you would be willing to share. And when you're promoted, we will also give you audio ability.
I remember with the last panelist when I was reminding her about her screen, her screensaver in the background, her wallpaper. I said, you know, don't forget to make it a Kappa-friendly one, just in case you have, or if you want to have your Justin Bieber obsession displayed to everyone, just make sure that you have that squared away, because you never know.
All right. If you have finished and are willing to be a volunteer, we'll just take a few. If you can raise your hand.
Marla, we had a volunteer before we even started. Piper Cummings is ready to share something. So I'm going to enable her audio so that she can speak to us.
Hello?
Hi, Piper.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
We can.
Ooh, you can hear my daughter in the background. Sorry, let me close my door. She's been fine the last 51 minutes, but today she decided to talk.
Oh, Piper, are you ready to be made presenter? Do you have something up on your screen to share?
I do.
Okay. You should see an alert that asks you to... Oh.
Oh, I love Oakland too. I love that.
Oh, so this is my baby girl when we went down to visit some girlfriends that live in the Bay Area, and one of them is a big Oakland fan. So I trike Oakland, and then we went to Muir Woods, and that's her by one of the big redwoods.
Oh, that's adorable. She's so cute. She is adorable.
I had to, of course. I was like, I'll share, I'll share.
Yeah, that came in right away. All right, do we have any other volunteers?
I did have a question. When I do this, does the presenter then share to the next person, or do I have to give my rights to somebody else?
The presenter takes care of that. I'm hopefully passing it over to Marla again.
You did, yeah, because we use WebEx, so it works a little bit differently. So it's good to see how the different tools work.
Great. Did we have any other volunteers?
I'm looking for hands raised. Let's see.
I see Allison
Okay.
and Angie.
All right, we'll start here at the top of the list. Allison, can you hear? Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, are you ready?
Say that again?
Do you have something to share?
I do.
In case we wondered.
Did you just take that photo?
Oh, no, it's been there for a while. Identity crisis. Or a thing for Jenny Craig.
That's awesome.
So there you go. There you have it.
Perfect. All right.
What a pretty kitty.
See, Angie will make you next presenter. Angie, are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Angie.
Hello. I'm trying to find my. I know.
Okay, here we go.
So that's my daughter and my husband on the 4th of July. It's very exciting. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Karen. I can't see it yet.
I know, I'm not seeing it either. Angie,
Oh wait.
yeah, show your screen. There you go.
Okay, can you see it now?
Oh,
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah. There. So that's my daughter and my husband. It's very exciting.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yes.
love it.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Kyle, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you have something to share?
Yes.
Okay. You'll see the presenter button. Ah.
Oh,
Yay!
I figured we're all in the Kappa mode today, so we'll just get a little piece of headquarters there.
love it. That's great. That's a good photo.
It's a gorgeous photo.
I know. We should stick it on like a version of the key or something.
Mm-hmm.
I could have taken a picture of the black cat that is sitting on my desk with its tail on my mouse as we speak, but we already had a cat picture, so there you were.
Did you take this photo, Kyle?
I did. That was
It is gorgeous.
I think it was at ACS two years ago. I know. It's like a magazine cover.
Okay. Let's do one more. I have Pat, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, do you have something to show us?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Now, how do I share? Okay, just a picture of the kids at the beach.
Oh, that's great. What beach is that?
My daughter's a Kappa, so that's exciting.
Oh. What beach is it?
Ocracoke, which is at the bottom of the Outer Banks.
Oh,
Not many people go there. It's very empty.
perfect kind of beach.
Yep.
Oh, thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now for all of you who were presenters, I'm muting you again just so we don't get extra audio and echoes bouncing around. So thanks to all of you for taking part in that little activity.
All right. You should now see my screen again. Just looking at best practices. To wrap up, we're going to share some of the best practices strategies. Find your question pane and type your best practice suggestion. Something that you picked up either tonight or that you've just seen from participating in other webinars, but any best practice strategies that you might suggest.
Missy says practice and breathe. Those questions can come fast and furious.
I like that.
Allison likes having polling questions as a backup in case something goes wrong.
Yep. Tips and tools in the pocket. Good. Okay. Reese has a couple of things she wanted to share from just some of her experiences.
Definitely use a high-speed wired connection rather than wireless. Just having that plug-in really helps. Make sure to start at least start about 2 minutes past the hour. This gives people time to call in, but it doesn't ask those who arrived on time to wait too long. It will be tempting to wait for more people to join, but be strong. Don't do it. Start as timely as possible. Do close all unnecessary applications, email, instant messaging, so on and so forth. Don't make your GoToWebinar program work too hard. You also might experience some delays in the visual feature if you don't close all of your unnecessary applications. Choose a location where there's little background noise, and then also use that location when you practice. So again, keep that same location so you know what you're going to have on your plate when you do the live version. Make sure to introduce yourself when you begin speaking and ask your panelists to identify themselves. Not everyone may recognize the voices they hear. Also, be aware of your own muted and unmuted status. This is indicated by the green microphone or telephone icon in the Grab tab along the side of your control panel, and then a red line through the icon will indicate that you are muted. A green icon indicates that you're unmuted. This, again, I sometimes find the hard way. I'll mute myself, and then later on I'll ask a question. I'm wondering, why isn't anyone answering my question? And it's, oh, ha, 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 I am muted. That's why. So, again, just be aware of your own muted and unmuted status. And then practice. As others mentioned, practicing definitely helps you eliminate anything that you could have changed before you did the live version, so practice. I also recommend printing out a script to run beside you, so if your presenter or panelist can provide you with a script ahead of time, definitely print that out and just run along it. Or again, if you want to be paper friendly, just practice with it alongside your script. So I think that's about it, unless you, Karen, or Marla want to jump in with any other best practices.
No, my only other thing, and this may sound corny, and I think it's everybody's personality, but I like to get very early to the webinar session. We all signed on at about 30 minutes beforehand just to test everything. Get your water, get your throat lozenges, put your, all your things around, your phone that maybe gives you a timer to watch the time. Just having those things all lined out, the script that Reese mentioned, just making sure everything is set up and that you have the time to do that and you're not feeling rushed.
Well, I remember last night when we were running our practice session, I had trouble logging into the right webinar link. I know, Karen, you had some technical difficulties with your telephone or mic and speakers, and that's something that could have definitely, even with a practice session, happened again today. So having that half an hour buffer just made sure that everything was smooth sailing. So I love that idea, too.
A couple other things that were mentioned by some of you. Kyle says to schedule a call with the presenter ahead of time. Scheduling a practice session is something that we will ask you to do so that you can go through pretty much the entire presentation before you do it live with an audience. So yeah, that practice and understanding something about the topic is something else that's helpful, not required, but helpful. And another tip is to turn off your phone if you are not using your telephone for the connection. Turning it off so that you don't get phone calls while you're doing the webinar is another great tip, and that's from Pat.
Great. GoToWebinar does offer several training videos online. Reese has actually spent some time with these videos. Reese, do you have any special recommendations?
I think the best videos to start with are the Becoming the Online Presenter Everyone Enjoys. That's nice to see, so you can also give some great feedback to your presenters and panelists on how to help them bump up their interactivity and the enjoyment of their attendees. Q&A Made Easy, definitely check that out. Like Karen and Marla had said before, the Q&A portion can become the full-time producer position. So if you kind of brush up on that, that video definitely gives a quick 10-minute introduction on how to make it easy for you. Another great one is engaging your audience. But there are about 10 different ones that are on the GoToWebinar website, and they're only about 2 minutes. The longest one I think is only 10 minutes. So just when you ever get a few minutes here and there, just check out the GoToWebinar training websites and glean some of those great best practices on their training videos. I also probably had way too much time on my hands and went to YouTube for some GoToWebinars, and they actually have some fantastic training webinars there as well. So you can peruse those to your leisure. I can also send some great websites to Karen to have her send them out to you too. My favorite one, even just for amusement, was the best practices for audio troubleshooting, simply because the presenter throughout the entire webinar had the most awful feedback that you could possibly imagine. So the irony was amusing to me. But it also, watching her troubleshoot how to do that was very fascinating, and she kind of walked through it. So yeah, it's a good one too. But like I said, the GoToWebinar training video that is on the GoToWebinar website, that is the best place, and then YouTube.
Excellent. And also on the GoToWebinar, there's a user guide, and it's very comprehensive, and the PDF version is searchable, which is wonderful. This document and the online articles are great for finding answers to technical questions quickly. The general producer script will be emailed to you when you are assigned to produce a particular webinar. Modify the document to suit your session. And at this time, we have covered all our content for tonight. I do want to take a moment to open up and see if anyone has any additional questions that you have come as a result of tonight. Also, too, if you think of questions after this session is over, feel free to email Karen or myself or Reese, and we are all very happy to help you with your webinar producing. Karen, are there any questions coming in?
I'm not seeing any new ones right now. There were some that there was kind of a hold. The questions pane was in a holding pattern for a little while, and I missed some that were submitted earlier. So a few things that I did want to pull from those. The webinar at kkg.org login that you will use as a producer should be unique to you. That's not something we want to give out to just anybody. You know, if they're having trouble getting on, oh, well, here, use this to log in. Well, that adds another organizer or producer to the session, and that's not something we want to do. We want to find a way to get the attendees on as an attendee or get the panelist on as a panelist. So keep in mind that webinar at kkg.org login is specifically for you. Let's see, something else. Just remembering that the producer and the organizer are one and the same with GoToWebinar, and the documents that you will see there on the website, they are the same person. We're talking about the same thing there.
Also, Karen, I wanted to mention that if for some reason when you're trying to answer all the questions or forward them to the correct panelists, if you miss something, don't worry, it's okay, and you can even let the audience know that all of these questions are captured, and you have the ability to answer them after the webinar. If for some reason you can't get to it during the webinar, all will not be lost. It's actually recorded by the GoToWebinar system, and we have the opportunity to go back and answer them after the webinar if necessary.
Okay. Well, I would like to thank all of you for your time and attention to this training. We've gone over an hour. Typically, we don't like them to go quite this long, but I appreciate your time and staying with us. And thank you for volunteering to be part of the producer team. Marla did a great job as presenter, and Reese, thanks for helping to lead the session. Any questions or comments, you can email us at the addresses shown. When you exit the webinar tonight, a survey will open up on your screen. You'll be prompted to respond to a few evaluation questions. Please give us your honest opinions and respond to tonight's webinar. Your feedback will help us to put together webinar trainings in the future. Thanks so much. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a great night, everyone. Good night.